everyone. So glad you found us on the map, the Mental Health and Addiction Podcast. I'm Kimberly Walsh, and I'm here with my fellow co-host, the outspoken Mr. Andy Panda Bernstein.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody.
Long.
Hello.
We're going to introduce our guests in just a minute, but just a quick background on us. Chris Long has been in this industry for many years, dedicating herself to working with families and helping people get into treatment. And Andy has been an advocate for mental health and addiction, both as the producer of Crosscheck Radio as well as through his own experiences. And as for me, I'm a person in long-term recovery and the founder of a sober home for women on Grady's Landing. We put this podcast together because all three of us are very passionate about reducing the stigma around mental health and addiction. And we believe that the more light we shed on these topics, the less people will stigmatize and otherwise punish those who suffer from these diseases. Moreover, we hope the information we provide and the topics we discuss will help encourage people to seek treatment. Thanks to Foxboro Cable Access TV, we now have the ability to take your questions live during the show. And we have all of our episodes available on iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn. So please post and share the show with your followers. And don't forget to tag your friends. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Everybody, how are you all doing today? Everybody well?
This wonderful COVID dream, waiting tonight for our school committee to decide what way our schools are going to go in about a month. So, yeah, we're in the ballast.
Yeah, it's very confusing. Confusing what's going on right now. And Kimberly?
Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in, that's for sure. Hopefully, our guests will give us some hope today and some positive things we can take away from this whole coronavirus nightmare.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few. And then Willie.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, I have a concern about the schools starting up again. My youngest son teaches, in a high school, and he has lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. So I'm not really too thrilled about him being around incubators, so I don't know what they're going to do. He should be able to do all online courses, but we'll see.
I was just at the doctor early this morning, and wow, that was weird. It was weird that I had to check in and I had to wait and I had to get an x-ray, but I had to call to get the x-ray. And once I got the x-ray, then I had to call to see the doctor.
Are they x-raying your brain to make sure it's still there?
Yeah, an x-ray on my brain.
Reminds me of that Cypress Hill song, Insane in the Membrane.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, no. So anyway, let me share a quick article with everybody. This came to us from themighty.com. And the article says, new study suggests COVID-19 survivors often face mental health struggles. So we kind of had talked about that last week, but I guess, or in a previous show, but what they're saying is that they studied more than half of the people who survived COVID-19, a new study, and that they have developed a mental health condition after getting through the virus. Right. And the research was published in the Journal of Brain Behavior and Immunity and looked at participants who were hospitalized during the coronavirus and their mental health diagnosis. So the study was done by asking individuals to fill out a questionnaire at 1 month follow-up appointments after to hospital treatment. And so this is the first study looking at mental health outcomes following hospital treatment for COVID survivors. Now, some of the statistics are they had 402 adult participants. The questionnaire screened for post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, insomnia, and obsessive compulsive symptoms. The responses showed that following the prevalence of mental health impacts, 28% for PTSD, 31% for depression, 42% for anxiety, 20% for OC, obsessive compulsive symptoms, and 40% for insomnia. And they also said that 56% of respondents were in the diagnosable range for at least one condition. So
I'm curious to see, Willie, what's it called when you don't want you're homophobic, when you don't want to leave the home?
Agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia.
Yeah. How many people are going to become agoraphobic because of what social media and the news and the world has done to us. Like, how many people are already doing that?
Yeah, yeah. It's almost a situational agoraphobia, where, where people would have it without the COVID. I think this is, people are displaying the signs and symptoms of it though now, but it's based on a situational, which is getting the virus. So, and people, I mean, clients of mine are hitting the pandemic wall. I mean, I've had several clients, OCD, and they're germophobic, and they're inpatient. I've had a few that have had to go back to inpatient. I have one woman that she said if she could buy hand sanitizer in 55-gallon drums, she would buy it. And it's like,
And Clorox Bleach said that we're not going to see their wipes back on the shelves readily available until 2021.
Wow.
So the according to the BBC, psychiatrists are actually warning of a tsunami of mental illness.
Yeah.
They are saying they're dealing with a mental health crisis while patients shun routine appointments. Willie, I don't know, in your world, are you?
I mean, I'm getting bombed now. I'm getting.
Don't use that term, please.
Yeah.
I'm getting inundated with requests for referrals. Anywhere, some weeks it's 3 to 5, other weeks it's 5 to 10, and I don't have the space. So I'm constantly trying to refer to colleagues, and now they don't have the space. So, I mean, it's really taking off, the need for mental health services. And then, as I've noted in a few other shows, there's a sort of a stigma that's creeping back in again too. Oh, if you don't have, a COVID or a physical illness, then, hey, we're trying to take care of this. So those people will have to wait. So.
Willie, what do you tell them? I'm just curious. What do you tell the people who have that agoraphobia?
What do I tell them? I actually have a handout that was put together by a psychologist up on the North Shore, and it's how to get through the quarantine, how to get through the COVID quarantine. And if you want, I'll be happy to send it to anybody. It's like 24 points and things to bear in mind and stuff. So what I'll do with clients is I'll go through this list with them, and then we'll start talking, outside the list too. What can you be doing?
Great. This is a great segue, Willie.
Yeah. I mean,
because our guest,
yeah,
Terry Finnegan Lynch, who Kimberly's going to. Hi, Terry. We were so rude we didn't introduce her. Hi, Terry. I'm Andy. This is Chris, and that's Kimberly, and that's
Hi.
Willie. And Kimberly's going to introduce Terry because this is going to be some of the things that she's going to talk about today. So,
excellent.
Kimberly,
Exactly.
take it away, my friend.
Well, like Andy said, I'm glad you met everybody. I was going to do that. So, so Terry is a certified health and life coach, and she's come on the show today. Actually, Fox Cable Access is picking up her new show called Lofty Questions, which has a YouTube channel, which I think Mike will post for us a little bit later. But welcome to the show, Terry. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to create Lofty Questions.
Well, thank you guys. This is truly an honor to be here. And I've watched some of your broadcasts for the first time, not knowing about your program, and very impressed with the conviction and passion, the knowledge that you all share. I am in long-term recovery as well. I got sober in 2002, and that journey took me through many, many experiences, one of them becoming a nurse when I was 52. And I worked in cardiology for 10 years and felt very frustrated by the fact that people didn't get better. So I said, how can I really help people? And I went back to school to become a health and life coach. So I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And what happened when COVID and the shelter in place happened for me as a recovered senior living alone, it became quite overwhelming on the span of feeling good and feeling bad. And so I used my coach to figure out what could I gain from this experience instead of staying in the losses. So Lofty Questions is based on the structure of how coaches work to find out what do you want, what stands in the way of getting it, and then what tools do you need to get it, to actually have it. So currently I'm working with a couple of 20-somethings who both have addiction tendencies. And what we do together is to look at really what are you afraid to ask for in the fear that you won't get it, and giving them the space to have the choices within that framework. I wouldn't classify either as chronic addicts, but both have put their substances down through this work. And the idea is, this is a global pause. How can we let this serve you? And how do you feel about the amplification of what I refer to as static? So prior to COVID, I had a lot of static that was unhappiness. But when COVID and shelter in place happened, it became really loud and I couldn't ignore it. And so I think that that's the opportunity, is to find these underlying causes that drive the need for a substitute to answer that question and that emotion. So that's what we've been doing, is through this structure of life coaching, allowing these kids to really ask for what they want. And so both of them have up-leveled their jobs, have better relationships with their parents, have left toxic relationships, and are using other tools than substitutes to find happiness. And we're halfway through our program. So what I've found is that, the Zoom calls with AA, they're wonderful because you can go anywhere in the world and join one. And yet the fact that we're not in those halls is creating a really big void about the support that people deserve and need. And although I'm only helping a couple of people, this structure has been very, very useful for their root causes, that emotion underneath, the unmet need underneath. And so that's what we work on. And Lofty Questions is a TV show that poses a question, and then I use these strategies to show, as if you were in a session with me, how it works. And it gives you the opportunity to apply it to yourself, because then I have a guest who explains how it worked for them. And so that's the launch of the program.
Could you give us an example, Terry, of some of the questions that you ask your guests on your show?
Yeah, the first one was really about the pause. So because everything, shelter in place made us go physically inside, it also allowed us to go emotionally inside and listen to your unmet need. So the first step was being in appreciation for the pause, because the norm is multitasking and being involved in so many things, and that was subtracted from us. And we usually look at subtraction as a negative, that's a loss. And instead, I frame it to say this is an opportunity. Pause is the opportunity to ask, what is your unmet need? So the paradigm in this is that when we pause, it gives us choices. Because what I saw in myself in that shelter in place was two things. One was that I was really ignoring how lonely I was as a senior. And the other was that I live a rat race. So those were the two things that I really listened to in the pause. And then with my coach, we asked, what do you want? And, I listened to my heart, and I heard the answer that I want to be running across, actually, it's that field right over there behind me, on my 63rd birthday with a new dog. And my coach said, oh, you want a dog? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I do. And, I now have this beautiful puppy, Darby, and I get outside. I get love, and I have a responsibility, and it filled that unmet need that was, what I used to fill with alcohol, and what was the potential risk if I didn't listen to the unmet need that I heard during the pause. So what we do in the interview is have a client who experienced the pause and also made a change like I just described. And so the paradigm is that a pause creates choices, and choices create change. What do you want?
Yeah, I love that. Andy, did you have something you wanted
Yeah,
to
so you had mentioned that you're in sobriety. Can you speak to a little bit, if you'd be okay with it, a little bit about kind of your personal story?
Oh my gosh. I was telling Kim when we spoke yesterday, I'll tell people my story in an elevator. So I love sharing it because it's quite miraculous, actually. I was married to a gentleman who felt betrayed by me and became very violent in that. And I come from a long line of alcoholics, my mother, my sister, all my aunts and grandparents. And I knew that I had this vulnerability to drink. So this relationship was a perfect fit for me to give myself permission to drink in that chaos and anger of the household. But it became really extreme years later, and my drinking was out of control. So I retired from my job of working in a family business and went to AA. And that was in 1999, and I was 42 years old. And I only stayed sober 3 months at a time, 3 months in and 3 months out, for 3 years. Because what I found was the pain of drinking was so great that I would have to get sober. But the pain of being sober was so great that I had to drink. So I would go back and forth in these two drastic feelings of pain and suffering, a hopeless state of mind and body, whether I was sober or not. And then on Halloween of 2002, my 16-year-old son said, Mom, I will not live like this another day. One of you has to go. And Brian was advocating for his wellness, and he gave me permission to advocate for mine. And I left that day with the shirt on my back. And I didn't drink for a few days, and then I drank like a fish for a few more. But I woke up on November 11th, and I raised my head to heaven, and I said, God, you've got this, right? And I've been sober since. The obsession and compulsion to drink vanished. And I went back to all my AA meetings, and I did the work, used a sponsor, did my steps, prayed, and the journey began in that moment where I asked a power greater than myself to do what I couldn't do for myself. And, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. For me, the slowly was the 3 years that I couldn't surrender, that I was still in the barbershop getting a haircut, so to speak,
Right.
by staying home, right? And then I left, and then it was just me and my disease. And that separation allowed me to really ask for what I wanted. It was a big pause, actually, and being alone and without excuses. I truly invited the miracle into my life, and I was blessed with it in an instant. I went to an AA meeting that afternoon at Norwood Hospital in the cafeteria, and there were a few of the elders sitting against the wall where they always sat, and they looked at me, and I was still covered with black and blues. And one of them, an Irish gent, said, we didn't think you'd make it.
Wow.
And there I was.
Well,
So I did everything AA asked me to. I went individual therapy, group therapy, retreats, Sister Maurice was there the whole time, a great mentor. And then, nursing school and coaching anchored my mission to find that underlying cause and help people with all my experience to find it too. What's missing in your life? What's the unmet need? And coaching helps do that. And mental illness is, one of the, I kind of look at it as those four tires on a car. If you've got four flat tires and you only inflate one, you're still stuck. You can't move. You can't go anywhere. So what I look at in my experience is, what are your four tires? Is it mental health? Is it domestic violence? Is it addiction? Is it, disruptive behavior? And let's get all four tires filled with air and look at it, the whole picture. So that's what my hope is as a life coach.
Domestic. Okay. So, let's if we can back up for a second. We talk about domestic violence, which is obviously, very prevalent now too, as part of the discussion in society.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? What were the, how did you start to address that as well?
It was very challenging. I mean, when we met as 20-year-olds, I was afraid of him then, but I also had this underlying belief that no one else would love me. So I stayed. So that message was an underlying piece. And the problem that I found, or the solution that I found, is that his violence and my addiction were a perfect match. Because in the end, I would actually get up, get him angry at me, so I would have permission to drink, because I knew that I was dying as an alcoholic and I needed this real big reason to be able to drink with permission, because I was already going to AA. So there's this vicious cycle that we play as the victim, because we're also a perpetrator in it.
Willie,
Yeah.
Question for you, working in private practice and obviously in the addiction field. How often do you see domestic violence as part of the people that you treat? Is that something prevalent?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common denominator. I actually have a student who this semester was doing her internship for a domestic violence group up in the Burlington area, Mass, and she said, at the prior to the COVID, they were getting maybe 3 to 5 calls a week, and then when COVID came, all of a sudden she's getting 3 to 5 a day. I mean, it just increased, and package stores open and everything. I mean, it just really exacerbated the whole deal. So,
especially being at home with everybody, and
yeah. I mean, as far as up on the North Shore with my practice and stuff, I do get clients in, from time to time with some domestic violence issues. And up on the North Shore, we have an organization, Hawk on the North Shore, and they address all the domestic.
What does that stand for?
Yeah, you would ask me. I'm going to have to look it up for you, just the way I am. But then Cambridge Health Alliance, they also have VOV, Victims of Violence, if you're closer to the Boston area and stuff too. But
yeah, I went through Dove, D-O-V-E, out of Israel. And it was so interesting because I was looking with these women and I said, you guys are messed up. Like, I couldn't even see my own story at that beginning as being as crazy as it really was. There's a very blind eye to the chaos because it fills a need. For me, it did anyway.
Hawk, I just have to interject. It's Hawk. Actually, I just found it. Hawk stands for Healing Abuse, Working for Change. Healing Abuse, Working for Change, and they're based in Salem.
So you had mentioned, four tires. Was that kind of a metaphor? I mean, can you, are there 4 key things that you try to use in reference to the tires analogy?
Yeah. So what I do with my clients is I'm a photographer. So I use images that the client can relate to. And then I put a phrase, a mantra, a paradigm in the image, and I give them one, 2 or 3 each week, and it builds a visual book on what we're doing. So when we get to the 4th session, we look at so to speak, the comorbidities of your struggle. You know, what else is going on that you need to resolve. So I found an axle with 4 tires on it.
Okay.
But I learned it originally when I was a mental health worker at Westwood Lodge, which was an addiction dual diagnosis unit. I worked there for 2 years in early recovery. And that's when I first started to use the language, because they were being dual diagnosed. There were multiple issues that, you know, the kids would take their pills but drink, or, you know, not go to their psychiatry appointment, or, you know, so I was looking at it to say, so they can relate to it, that there's not just one problem here, and if you have 3 flat tires, you're not going anywhere. So where do you want to go, and how do you want to get there? Bring value to each of these things.
When you,
I just have to say, Andy, it just cracked me up when you asked, is that a metaphor? Having the comic mind, it's like, no. She has people come in with 4 tires and they sit around and they blow up one and then they blow up another one. It was a good rhetorical question.
No.
Is that a metaphor? It's
No.
Of course it's a metaphor.
What I'm trying to say is, yes, 4 tires, but are there, what I meant was, are there specific?
Too late.
I love the levity, though. I love the levity, really.
You're not
Sorry,
coming
I
on
had to
anymore.
blow
You're
this
off.
up. Yeah.
Forget it. Goodbye. You can hang up. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry, I cracked me up. Go ahead.
I love you.
Yeah.
So
That metaphor.
So I know, you know what I meant, but my question to you is,
4 tires.
Yes.
okay. So when you deal with someone who comes to you, because I've gone to a life coach before, years ago,
Okay.
feeling very stuck, like where am I headed? What am I doing? Where am I headed? And, you know, I spent time and we kind of wrote out on a board, kind of what my goals are, my aspirations and things like that. So, you know, is there a big difference between somebody who is in recovery or an addiction and treating them compared to someone who isn't, or is it still kind of the same principles of moving forward in your life? Like it does your approach, does it differ?
It's coaches are trained with different guidelines. So the spine of my work is anchored in programming, identity, beliefs, decisions, behavior, and outcome. So most time people start at decisions. What decisions do you want to make about your life? And you're like, okay, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to have a better relationship with my kid. And you start with that decision. But what we find in our coaching model is that's not really sustainable, because if you don't go to the programming, identity, and beliefs, then you slip back into the boomerang of who I am that is in that underlying model of my story, which often is created, written, and marked in time by the time you're 6 years old. So my story as a daughter of an alcoholic mother was victim hero. By the time I was 6 years old, my story was victim hero, and it played out right to the day that Brian asked me to leave at 45 years old. So what I do with my clients is we look at what is your program, like what is your operating system, what is your belief, what is your identity that brought you to that belief, and what is the programming that wrote the story from your family of origin is mostly where it comes from. So the reason that my work is evolutionary for the client is that we go back to the beginning and we say, someone else wrote that story for you.
Right. You got to deprogram. You're deprogramming yourself.
So we literally reprogram the brain so that the habits that you're in now that are dependent upon your story and your operating system, if we change the operating system, your habits change automatically.
No, that's great. And then my question is that my other question is because I talk to a lot of people, and I want to hear from you guys as well. But I talk to a lot of people who ask for advice, right? Whether it's my sister, my cousin, people are always like venting to me, and they're looking for answers, but they're really not looking for answers. They're just looking for an ear on the phone. But as a practitioner, do you ever get frustrated? Like, you're not listening to what I'm saying and you're not taking action. Can you shed some light on that? Does that ever take place with you? Honestly, like do you
Well, I
ever
mean,
get,
I get referrals all the time from people in other disciplines, that don't want to work with addiction clients because of the ambivalence factor. It's like you tell them what they need to do and they don't do it, and it's like, well, how good are you as a therapist at being able to work with ambivalence? I want to use, I don't want to use, I want to use, I don't want to use. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on the discipline a lot of times that you're in or coming out of. I mean, those of us that work in addiction know that it's there, and it's something that we have to contend with, and we use motivational interviewing or, whatever else,
you're
but
human, right? And then do you get to the point where it's like, you know what, I'm wasting, maybe this isn't, I can't help you. Right. Like, I mean, do you ever get to the point where you're like, I can't help you? I mean, Chris, you work with a lot of folks. Kimberly, you work with folks. Do you ever find like,
they usually
wow,
walk away from me first.
I would.
They'll walk away. I don't walk away from anyone. They
No.
walk away from me, and that's.
Right.
I still have a list. I still have a list of people that I started with, and then they ghosted out. And once a month, I have this list of people that I just send them a text, and I just say, "Hey, I'm still here. No shame, no blame. You want to call me? I'll be around."
Exactly.
That's what
You
you
know?
do. That's perfect.
They walk
Yeah.
away because we go somewhere they're uncomfortable. At the end of the day, that's just it. We start to open Pandora's box and we help them discover, things that are very uncomfortable that they don't want to talk about. And, somebody who's in the throes of addiction, telling them that we have to talk about it will make them feel better is really scary. It's,
It is.
I don't like going to the doctor.
Relapse.
I think it's been one of the things I've been surprised about doing the teletherapy piece now because of the COVID too, is that I'm finding that people, because we're not actually in a room face to face, but we're face to face on a screen, that a lot of times they'll open up and tell me more than it would take a longer period of time if we were face to face than if we're on a screen. On a screen, I'm tending to get information faster than I would normally. It would take a longer period of time, to build up a trust, meeting face to face than the screen action is. So,
Kimberly?
I agree with that, Willie. I think that people have a level of comfort when it's not face to face. You say more on the phone sometimes because people can't see you, or they can't. I'm not sure what that is, a detachment or something that makes them feel safer. I'm not sure, but I definitely think that's true for sure. But I wanted to go back to one thing that Terry indicated. You said that by 6 years old, your story is written. Is that, where did you come up with that, or where did you get that?
It's actually science. It's where the I'm not actually sure of where it originated from because I drank for 25 years, so those kind of details leave me. But it's a scientific confirmation that by the time you're 6, maybe 8 years old, that stage of development of what your story is done. So Maslow's, Erik Erikson's stages of development: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus whatever the word is. But there's 3 key stages that occur by the time you're 6 years old. And there is where your story is anchored. So that by the time you're in first grade, you're literally operating with it. And it works really well because you created it. It works in the environment you're in. However, it gets old by the time you're 15. By the time you're 15, it doesn't really work anymore, especially if it came from the weaker side of growth and development. So I grew up totally not trusting from the cradle, from my crib. I remember not trusting. So each time I moved into a next stage, I moved into a stage that was weakened by the earlier stage, also coming from a weaker side. So what I did in recovery was without coaches, but just in this, gift of awakening, was I played that story from my crib where I was crying for help, and someone opened the door and put their hand down and shut the light off and left the room and left me in darkness. And I knew that's it. I'm on my own. And I saw that story differently. The hand came in, shut the light off, and I heard in my head, in my heart, it's nap time, little one, go to sleep. So what I created as a trauma in my early stages of development, I rewrote as the story I really need to live in, and which was probably more accurate. The stories don't really matter if they're real or imagined. They just matter that they're your story to tell, that you live by.
Very true.
So we go in, look at that. And in regards to the people not staying, so the spine of what I work with is session 5, and there are 12, is sabotage. So I go through 1, 2, 3, and 4, and people start to grow incrementally. What the paradigm I use to introduce this to people is small hinges swing big doors. No matter a castle or a shack, there's hinges that swing the door. So we usually think, I've got to lift this big door and move it. But what I do is give hinges that allow you to move the door. So session 1, 2, 3, and 4 are those hinges. And 5 comes in, you're like, okay, I'm actually doing good. And they run. Now, right now I'm working with a 72-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 28-year-old, and a 59-year-old. And every single one bailed in week 5.
Wow.
It's predictable.
Why?
So what I do is I laugh and I say, did exactly what nature wants you to do. Run and hide. And this is why. And now I'm going to introduce how we sabotage our lives when they start to get good. And here are the tools to use to recognize your own sabotage.
Why do you think people do that? Why do you think people do the sabotage? They can't
Well,
own.
Yeah, because there's the fear that I will have to own this new life, and I won't be able to, because ordinarily we make changes from decisions, but here we're making changes from core. So they mistrust that the goodness that they're feeling is sustainable. But because there's 12 sessions, what follows anchors that it is sustainable, and it is yours to choose and own. And so nature says, so what I also teach is that there are 3 brains. I mean, we have our left and our right that everybody knows about, but we have a brain at the base of our skull, which is the reptilian brain. It's our original brain from being a mammal, and it is fight, flight, or freeze. Then you have your limbic brain in the middle, which is about emotion, and the cortex brain, which is the enlightened brain of mankind. So what I teach is, what brain are you operating from? And usually the critter brain is fight, flight, or freeze. Everybody recognizes it. Everybody goes there. And what I to say thank you when that critter brain shows up, instead of fighting it, we go in and we say, thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I feel like I'm going to be okay. I'm going to try to go for this walk or leave the house or call a friend or whatever that small hinge is. And what you do is you give permission for the critter brain to try to keep you safe and actually stagnant, right where it knows. And you say thank you, and that gratitude releases the pressure to stay there, and then the cortex brain can take its practice into the change, and then you're not competing anymore. The cortex brain and the critter brain aren't competing.
But doesn't it start, because I'm going through some of this now, doesn't it start where, like, because you've been programmed a certain way, and then when things start to get better for you, then you start to worry that the other shoe's going to drop, in a sense.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's all kinds of different ways that people, go into that fear factor. We learned in AA that there's 5 forms of fear, right? Instead of the 99 that made to my fear list, I had 99 different words for fear when I did my 4th step. There are 5. Fear of other people's opinions, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of not getting what I want, in fear of losing what I have. So I show people there's 5 fears. Here you go. Which one is your fear that's holding you right now in your present state? Because right now, that's your desired state. Wherever you are is actually your desired state.
Terry, do you
Because
think
that's
though
where you are.
there's also a level, a certain aspect of comfortability, like people do things because they know they're comfortable. They know what's going to happen next, so they can, you can be familiar with sadness, and so you kind of go towards sadness. That's what you know how to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I get the people all the time that hate their job, and they'll come in, they'll bitch about a job like a tea kettle that lets off steam so it doesn't explode. But then you do a confrontation on it. Hey, have you ever thought about going back to school or looking for something else for work?
I don't want to hear that.
Then
Right.
the fear comes right up. It's like, no, I'm too old. I'm too this. I'm too that. I could never do that. Then we got to hit them with CBT.
Right.
Feelings are not facts.
They just want to have an ear to listen to, not
Well, there's
necessarily.
the fear of change. The fear of change, even if it's for something healthier, because people aren't used to being. Many people aren't used to being healthy, so it feels alien. That's where you get that impending doom feeling out of.
Well, right, and especially if you're like going through, if you have so much drama earlier in your life, and then the dust settles, and then you're like,
I see it with
okay,
all the time, Andy. Like when they come in and they start getting healthy and they're going for walks and they're eating nutritious food.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel good. What is this? What is this good feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not going to last. It's never been this smooth for this long. Something's going to happen.
Exactly.
I'll blow it up myself.
That's what happens to me, that I get like, wow, life is really good. I can't. So
Well, more people break out when things are going relatively smooth, and when
that's the
there's upset in their
self-sabotage.
lives. Yeah, I mean,
That's the
when
sabotage.
things are going smooth.
Sabotage.
What's happening? Hi guys. Only the main doors will unlock.
So do
Yeah,
they
the
come
side ones don't.
Is that a metaphor? Is that a metaphor? Is that?
I think it could be a meta
I was
5.
just I was just in my building because
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
But so I wanted to tell you that what's next after sabotage in the spine that I coach through is being naughty. So first we learn how I sabotage and why, and the next week is being naughty. It's inviting the rebel child within us to act out. So I ask all my clients to be naughty this week, not to, get arrested or whatever, but to give your inner child permission to misbehave, to be rebel, to be heard. So what happens is we get into this program where like, okay, I got to be really good. And then we don't appreciate that there's that child within that doesn't want to do that. So we intentionally reward in coaching the weekly get naughty behavior that fulfills the need to totally act out. So I coach families is my practice. So I have a mom and a son. So the mom is a goody two shoes. So she had a really, really hard time with this. So she was at the pool and she jumped in with all her fancy clothes on. She did take her shoes off. And she's like, I was naughty. And
That's cool.
That gave her that relief. Her son has a scooter and they were vacationing on a golf course and he rode his scooter through the sprinkler, got caught. But it worked out just fine. And he felt that satisfaction that I don't have to always be good. And so this is why this spine is sustainable, because I invite everyone once a week to give permission to your inner child to be a rebel and do it safely.
I would have a difficult time with some of my clients from Charlestown and Southie, though. If I said, hey, I want you to do something naughty, I'd probably be hearing about it on the evening news or reading about it in the Globe, so.
Yay!
I want you to do something naughty. It was just one bank,
It's just one bank. So you have a TV show you're working on.
Cool.
Yes. So it's the lofty questions. It came out of my COVID shelter in place, an amplified unmet need, So I created a program for Facebook called What is Your Buried Treasure of COVID-19? And it was a 4-part series which was a workshop. And when I was finished with it, I was like, this was really good content, but social media is so saturated. What can I do with it? And my cousin is a videographer for a couple of towns up in Central Mass. He was over for dinner, and we talked on the phone. He was over for dinner in December. But he said, Terry, what about a television show? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What do you mean a television show? And so he came here, and we filmed our first episode in June and the second one in July. And it has, 5 parts, is about 30 minutes long. And so we're inviting townships to pick it up and run it on their cable access channel. I have 20 towns now, including Foxboro, and I raised my family in Foxboro. So that was very special to have Foxboro to pick it up. And we're filming the 3rd episode this week, and it will be available like the 15th of August. So,
and are you going to have guests on, or is it going to be more, more discussion, or what's the kind of the format of it?
Well, the format is that I start with, a welcome and a lofty question, and I make a decision about what that lofty question is based on where we are in our culture right now with COVID. And then I use paradigms in my coaching model to answer questions, because they create a new way of thinking, and they're clever and they're memorable. So I use a paradigm to explain how to answer the question. And then I have a guest, and Kimberly has graciously said she would be my guest next month.
Oh, good.
Cool.
So in my September episode, Kimberly will be my guest, and we'll share in that question and paradigm ahead of time, and she can see how it might apply to her life, and then bring it to my loft.
Got it. Is there, can you give your website of where people can get in contact with you?
My website is www.masterwellness.com. That's my practice. Lofty Questions has a YouTube channel that you can see my episodes and experiencing them on YouTube versus on a cable network. And that's Lofty Questions with Terry Finnegan Lynch. Or you can email me at loftyquestions@gmail.com. If you are curious about what I do or want to have a discovery call, those are free for the opportunity to say, would this work for me? Do I like to work with her? And do I, as a coach, want to work with you? Do I believe that I can hold you in inevitable success? Because that's my promise.
Would you say, if you could, in our closing minute, would you be able to say, if you could advise somebody out there who may be stuck or has some kind of blockage of how do I move forward, is there a piece of advice or a nugget that you might be able to pass along?
I guess the first thing I would do is go to the first episode strategy of pause and try to listen to what's underneath the static about what do you want? What's your unmet need? And once you identify that, bring it to light and start to embrace it. So for me, it was loneliness. I was filling it with temporary things, babysitting my grandkids or work or whatever. But it was still, I thought the answer was a guy. Well, it was a 4-legged friend. So
is that a metaphor or is that, no, I'm kidding.
Really? So asking yourself in the quiet, using the quiet as an opportunity. Ask yourself, what's my unmet need? And then give it permission to feel it and give it space. Don't be afraid of it, because that's what's holding you back.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, really great.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you to Willie too. That is our show for today, guys. As you all know, we do this podcast not only to help reduce stigma, but to be of service to anyone struggling with addiction or mental illness. We have access to an entire network of professionals. So help you find the right fit, please reach out to on our Facebook page and or the numbers given below our name during the podcast. So you've been listening to The Map, and we will see you all on Sunday at 9:30. Thank you for supporting our mission. And thank you again to and Lily. We'll see you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye, guys.
Bye now.
Thank you for the opportunity here.